Daniel Ross stepped from the sleek shuttle and into the marble foyer of the royal palace. He brushed a loose strand of hair from his forehead and squared his shoulders. He had traveled many light years across star systems to stand before princes. Jane. The grand hall stretched far above him, its ceiling painted with scenes of ancient battles and victories. Tall pillars lined the sides, each carved with symbols of the alien world. The air smelled faintly of sweet blossoms and warm stone. He wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. The blue jacket was crisp and clean. At his breast shone the small pin of the Terran Alliance. He had studied the customs and rules of ceremony. He hoped to show respect to Jane and her people. His mission was simple: greet the princess, offer friendship, and forge a bond between Earth and her realm. Waiting at the far end of the hall stood Princess Jane. She was pale like fresh moonlight. Her hair fell in smooth waves to her waist. She wore robes of silver and purple that caught the glow of the lamps. Her face was calm, almost distant. 2 guards flanked her. Samuel was tall and solid, with eyes like polished obsidian. Eric was younger, with a quick gaze and steady stance. They both stood very still, weapons at their sides. Daniel took measured steps. He noticed the guard's alert posture. His heart beat faster, but he stayed calm. He kept his hands at his sides. He remembered his training. Diplomatic visits always carried risk. But he believed in the power of words over weapons. When he reached the dais, he paused at the bottom of the steps. Jane watched him closely. Her eyes were a strange mixture of curiosity and cool assessment. Daniel dipped into a formal bow. He held the position for 3 slow counts. Then he straightened and spoke. "Your Highness, I am Daniel Ross of Earth. I come in peace as a friend and envoy of humanity. I bring greetings from my people. We wish to learn from you and to share in the wealth of knowledge between our worlds." His voice echoed softly in the high hall. Jane said nothing at first. She simply studied him. Her guards did not move. The noble guests behind Daniel waited in silence. Some wore bright robes, others darker tunics. They all watched with polite stillness. A single beam of light from a crystal chandelier caught Daniel's shoulder. Jane inclined her head. Her hair shifted like liquid metal. She clasped her hands in front of her. Finally, she spoke in a voice as smooth as polished stone. "Daniel Ross of Earth, your arrival honors this court. You speak with courage and respect. Tell me, what does Earth seek from our alliance?" Daniel felt relief at her warm tone. He held his ground and spoke clearly. "We seek friendship, trade, and the chance to grow together. Our worlds have much to offer each other. We have achievements in science and art. We have stories, music, and dreams. And we know that your realm holds wonders we have never seen. We wish to share and to learn." Jane nodded slowly. Her pale lips curved in a quiet smile. For a moment, the grand hall felt less vast. Daniel sensed a spark of connection between them. He imagined vines blooming on distant planets, lifetimes of discovery ahead. Then Jane turned her head and raised a hand. The guards shifted, stepping forward with practiced grace. Samuel positioned himself slightly in front of Eric as if to shield her. Daniel understood protocol demanded space and formality. He waited, heart steady, but Jane did not step back. Instead, she walked slowly down the dais steps. Her robes flowed like moonlight over marble. Each step echoed softly. The court watched in silence. Samuel and Eric exchanged quick glances, startled by her movement. When she reached the floor, she stopped just a breath away from Daniel. The guards hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Jane lifted her chin and held his gaze. Daniel saw strength and determination in her pale eyes. He stood very still. Then, without a word, Jane reached out and took Daniel's hand. Her touch was light but firm. Samuel drew a breath. Eric's hand hovered above his weapon. The court murmured as one. Jane brought Daniel's hand to her lips. She pressed a gentle kiss to his skin in front of everyone. Daniel felt warmth spread from his palm to his chest. He kept his face calm and allowed a small, respectful smile. A hush filled the hall. The nobles stared, mouths slightly open. Samuel and Eric looked stunned. Jane withdrew Daniel's hand and tucked it behind his back. She lifted her gaze to the assembled crowd. "I choose to welcome you as an equal," she said softly. "Your courage honors us. Your presence brings promise." The court burst into polite applause. Daniel bowed again, steps precise and respectful. Jane's guards relaxed their stances. Samuel offered a curt nod, while Eric's eyes shone with new respect. As music began to play softly from hidden speakers, Jane guided Daniel toward a circle of chairs. The guests moved aside. Ambassadors and nobles whispered in excited tones. The ceremony continued, but Daniel's heart raced with hope. He had not expected such boldness. She had shown him favor in a single, daring act. In that moment, he realized this mission would change everything. Daniel Ross sat in the circle of low chairs arranged for the reception. Around him, emissaries from many worlds spoke in quiet tones. They wore bright costumes of silk, metal, and unusual fabrics. Crystal goblets held sweet drinks that glowed faintly in the soft light. Daniel's pulse slowed as he took in the scene. He had lived through many ceremonies, but none so grand. Princess Jane stood at the center of the circle. Her robes of silver and purple draped over her slender frame like liquid starlight. She smiled at Daniel, her pale eyes bright with interest. The guards, Samuel and Eric, bowed their heads and stood a half step behind her. They watched Daniel closely. He knew they had questions, yet neither spoke. Jane raised one hand in greeting to the attending nobles. "Esteemed guests," she said, "we gather to welcome Daniel Ross of Earth. Let us learn from him, and let him learn from us." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some guests applauded softly. A few whispered boldly, commented on the boldness of the princess's gesture, still glowing from her kiss in the grand hall. Daniel inclined his head and cleared his throat. He stood and walked to the center next to Jane. The guards held back but remained alert. Daniel wanted to show respect, not to invade her space. He greeted the guests with calm words. "Princess Jane, honored rulers and noble guests," he began. "I thank you for this warm welcome. Earth seeks understanding and cooperation. We bring knowledge of our arts and sciences, and we wish to share our own stories. Yet we come also to listen. Your wisdom has guided your people for centuries. We wish to learn how to live in harmony, as you have done." His voice held a steady confidence. He spoke softly but clearly. The guests listened, intrigued by his calm manner. Jane's lips curved in a pleased smile. One noblewoman in robes of green and gold raised a hand. She had fine features and sharp eyes. "Mr. Ross," she asked, "Earth has warred among its own nations. How do you ensure that your people will not bring conflict to our realm?" Daniel considered her question. He met her gaze. "Conflict is a part of human history, yet we learn from it. We have created councils and treaties to prevent war. We believe in dialogue. We send envoys, not armies, to begin friendship. If ever our peoples differ, we wish to resolve it through talk, not swords." Jane nodded thoughtfully. Samuel relaxed slightly while Eric's brow remained tense. Daniel sensed he must prove that he could show restraint under pressure. Then Jane lifted her hand and asked a question of her own. "What of your world's science, Mr. Ross? What discovery do you bring that benefits life itself?" Daniel drew a small device from his pocket. It was a slender cylinder of polished metal. He offered it to Jane. "This is a universal translator," he explained. "With it, we decode languages we have never heard. It learns patterns and translates with high accuracy. It helped me understand your court speech before I came." Jane took the device, turning it in her hand. She tapped a panel, and a soft tone sounded. She spoke a phrase in her alien tongue, and Daniel smiled when the device repeated his own words. The guests looked on in wonder. A low hum of approval ran through the circle. Jane handed the device back to Daniel. "Impressive," she said. "Communication is the key to trust." The green-robed noblewoman leaned forward. "And what cannot be spoken, Mr. Ross?" "What then?" Daniel met her gentle challenge. He reached into a pocket and produced a small glass vial. Within it swirled a pale blue mist. "This is an image projector," he said. "It can capture a moment and replay it as light. It shows what cannot be described easily." He pressed a button. The room darkened slightly as the projector sprang to life on a nearby wall. A scene from Earth's landscape appeared, rolling hills under a sunset, children playing by a lake. Gasps of delight came from the crowd. Jane watched, her expression softening. The projected image shifted to show a scientist in a lab, then a doctor helping a patient, then a teacher guiding children. With each scene, Daniel spoke a few words explaining the human desire to help and learn. As the images faded, Jane clapped slowly. "You bring beauty and truth," she said. "Your people's spirit shines?" Samuel and Eric exchanged glances and released small breaths. Eric's tense posture loosened. Daniel felt relief at their approval. He noticed that Jane's shoulders had relaxed. The court had begun to accept him not as an outsider, but as an honored guest. Then the musical background changed. Harps and flutes filled the air. Servers appeared, offering trays of small, glowing pastries. Jane picked one and offered it to Daniel. He accepted graciously and tasted the delicate sweetness. The flavors bloomed like flowers on his tongue. He expressed his gratitude and complimented her chefs. The nobles laughed softly and raised their own pastries in a toast. Jane led the charge. "To friendship between our worlds," she proclaimed. "May our union bring prosperity and peace." Hands rose. Daniel joined in. Even Samuel and Eric shared nods of respect. The ceremony that began with formality now felt warm and sincere. After the toast, Jane turned to Daniel. "Walk with me," she said. "Show me your world, and I will show you mine." Daniel bowed. The guards fell in behind as he and Jane walked among the guests. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of Earth cities and her realm's wonders. Samuel and Eric matched their pace, voices low and respectful. They asked Daniel about his training, his life at home, and Earth's customs. Daniel answered all, with patience. He saw their respect grow. The edge of the circle, a nobleman asked Jane about her traditions. Jane described the way her people honored the stars, held festivals beneath twin moons, and celebrated the bonds of loyalty. Daniel listened, fascinated by the depth of her culture. As the ceremony drew to a close, Jane paused and faced Daniel. She smiled widely. "You have been an excellent guest," she said softly. "Tomorrow we shall dine in the sky gardens. You will see our fountains and hear our choirs." Daniel bowed again, grateful. "I look forward to it, Your Highness." Jane turned back to her court, raising both hands. "Return to your duties," she commanded. "But remember this day warmly, for it marks a new chapter." The guests dispersed, leaving Daniel, Jane, and the guards alone in the hall. Jane walked beside Daniel, her steps light. Samuel and Eric closed ranks around them. Daniel realized the bond he shared with Jane had grown stronger. She had broken protocol with her bold kiss. Now she invited him to walk beside her. Even her guards, once tense, now treated him as friend. In that moment, Daniel felt hope. He saw the promise of unity between their peoples, and he understood that this was only the beginning of a great journey, one he would share with Jane under alien stars and Earth's blue sky. The next morning, Daniel Ross stood at the edge of the Sky Garden balcony. The soft light of the twin suns bathed the alien world in pale gold. He felt a gentle breeze that carried the scent of alien flowers. Behind him, the palace's high towers reached into the sky like white spears. Princess Jane appeared at his side. She wore a simple gown of light blue silk. Her hair was tied back so she could move freely. She smiled at Daniel, her pale eyes warm. Samuel and Eric stood a few steps behind, ready to serve but not intrude. "Good morning, Daniel," Jane said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Good morning, Your Highness," Daniel replied. "This place is more beautiful than I imagined." Jane led him along the balcony. Below them spread terraces filled with fountain pools and gardens. Crystal bridges connected islands of green. Statues of past rulers held glowing orbs. The air buzzed with small winged creatures that looked like silver butterflies. "Less formal today," Jane said. "No court, no ceremony. Just you and me." "And my world," Daniel nodded, grateful for the calm. He had seen so much ceremony that he welcomed a break. He followed Jane down a staircase carved from white stone. When they reached the first terrace, Jane paused by a shimmering pool. She knelt and touched the water. The surface rippled like glass. "Watch!" Jane spoke words in her language. Daniel listened, trying to catch the meaning. The air above the pool filled with light. Shapes formed images of birds flying across. A red sky, children laughing in green fields, a human handshake, an alien bow. "It shows memories," Jane explained. "The pool records moments shared here. It shows what I choose to see." Daniel stepped closer. He recognized Earth in one image, children playing by a lake. He saw Jane's world in another, monks meditating beneath twin moons. "This is amazing," he said. Jane smiled. "It helps me remember why I lead my people. It reminds me of joy." Daniel looked at her. He felt honored to be here. Jane stood and took his hand. "Come," she said. "The choirs await." They walked along white marble paths lined with glowing lamps. Samuel carried a small box. Eric watched the sky. Daniel felt safe in their presence. At the next terrace, they reached a hall with open walls. The sky stretched overhead. In the center, a choir of singers stood on steps. Their robes shone in soft colors. They held crystal instruments that glowed. Jane motioned for Daniel to sit on a curved bench. He sat and watched as the choir began to sing. The music rose like a gentle wave. The singers' voices blended in a harmony that felt both strange and comforting. Daniel closed his eyes and let the notes fill him. He thought of Earth songs, children's lullabies, city street music, festival drums. This music was different. It spoke of peace and unity. When the song ended, Jane rose and walked to the choir. She spoke to them in her tongue. They nodded and began a faster song. This time the dancers appeared. They wore flowing garments. They moved like water over stones. Daniel watched as Jane swayed to the rhythm. She seemed free and happy. He wanted to join her, but he stayed where he was. After the performance, the choir lined up and presented gifts to Jane. She accepted a small crystal flower, a feather from a skylark, and a glass vial of golden dust. She showed each to Daniel. "These are treasures of my world," she said. "I share them with you." Daniel felt moved. He bowed and accepted each gift as she handed it. "Thank you," he said. "I will treasure these." Jane touched his arm gently. "Your gifts to me were your stories and your word. They matter more." Daniel felt warmth rise in his chest. He saw Jane's pale cheeks flush. They left the hall and walked toward a grove of tall trees. The leaves were silver and rustled in the breeze. The ground was soft with moss. Jane paused under a tree and looked at Daniel. "Tell me a story." She said. Daniel thought of Earth's tales, legends of heroes, myths of creation, simple bedtime stories. He chose one. "On my world, long ago, there lived a woman named Sarah. She built a temple to the stars. Each night she climbed to the roof to watch the sky. One night a shooting star fell. She found a glowing stone. She held it and felt hope. She carried that stone to her village. She told her people that the stone held light. They built their homes to catch its glow. They learned to share its warmth." Jane listened, eyes shining. When he finished, she kissed his cheek. "Beautiful," she said. "Your world values light." They sat on a soft patch of moss. Jane leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. He felt her warmth. Samuel and Eric sat respectfully a few steps away. They talked quietly about their homes. Daniel described Earth's oceans and mountains. Jane spoke of sky gardens and crystal halls. They found common ground, the joy of music, the comfort of stories, the beauty of nature. Daniel glanced at Jane. She looked peaceful, almost vulnerable. He reached and held her hand. Jane squeezed his fingers. She lifted her head and faced him. "Daniel," she said softly, "why did you choose to come here?" Daniel looked into her pale eyes. He thought of his mission, Earth's hopes and his own dreams. "I came for peace," he said. "I came for friendship. And I came because I saw your gift in the pool. I saw your kindness. I wanted to know you." Jane's eyes glowed. She stood and drew him up. She held him close. "I am glad you did," she whispered. They stood under the silver trees. Two souls from different worlds finding a bond? Samuel and Eric bowed their heads and gave the couple space. Daniel felt Jane's breath against his neck. He smelled the scent of her hair. The breeze stirred the leaves above. In that moment, he knew his journey had led him to something rare. Not just an alliance, but a friendship that felt as old as stars. He closed his eyes and held her gently. Jane rested her head on his chest. They stayed like that until the suns climbed higher in the sky. When they parted, Jane smiled and brushed a strand of hair from Daniel's face. "Come," she said. "There is more to share." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the palace, leaving footprints on moss and carrying the promise of unity between Earth and her realm. Princess Jane and Daniel Ross returned to the palace's inner courtyard as evening settled. The courtyard was lit by pale lanterns that floated on gentle currents of air. Stone benches lined the paths and flowering vines climbed the walls. The air was cool and fragrant. They walked slowly, side by side. Jane's gown of pale blue shimmered in lantern light. Daniel wore his envoy uniform, its deep color contrasting with her dress. Samuel and Eric followed at a respectful distance. The guards kept watch, but they matched their steps to the soft pace of the two royals. Jane paused at a fountain in the center. Water spilled from a carved statue, falling into a pool lit from below. Tiny lights danced on the water's surface. Jane touched the stone edge and looked at Daniel. "Speak true," she said. Daniel looked into her pale eyes. He felt a sudden weight on his chest. He thought of Earth's people, of his family, of the long journey he had taken. "Princess," he began, "I have spoken of friendship and peace. I believe those words. Yet I carry the hopes of millions. They look to me to ensure no harm comes. To this realm I ask only for trust." Jane listened quietly. She reached and laid her hand on his arm. Her touch was warm. "You have mine," she said. Daniel sighed in relief. He looked around the courtyard. The vines swayed and a night wind whispered through leaves. Jane led him toward a door of carved ivory. She pressed a small symbol above it. The door slid open to reveal a long hallway. Torches burned along the walls, casting dancing shadows. They entered the hallway. Jane drew Daniel's arm and guided him forward. The guards paused at the door, then followed. At the end of the corridor, they emerged into a vast library. Shelves of books and scrolls rose to the high ceiling. Soft lamps glowed on reading tables. A spiral staircase led to a balcony above. Jane smiled. "This is our council library. Few may enter here. But I want to share it with you." Daniel stepped inside, marveling. He ran a hand along a shelf with bound volumes. The spines glowed with symbols he could not read. Jane watched him gently. She spoke of the library's purpose: to preserve history, to record treaties, to hold knowledge of medicine, art, and star paths. Daniel nodded, impressed. He approached a reading table and sat. Jane reached a nearby shelf and pulled a small book. She brought it to him. "Here," she said. "It holds tales of my ancestors." Daniel opened the book. The pages were thin and silky. He saw drawings of figures in ancient armor, of battles and festivals. He tried to read the symbols. He laughed softly. "I cannot read these, but I can feel their meaning." Jane laughed too. "Soon, the translator will learn my language." Daniel closed the book and stood. He offered his hand and Jane took it. They walked deeper into the library. Samuel and Eric watched, arms folded respectfully. They stood near a map table that showed star systems connected by glowing lines. Jane pointed to the map. "This shows my realm's reach. We have friends on many worlds. But Earth is new to our charts." Daniel leaned over the table. He studied the lines. He traced a path with his finger. "And here," he said, "is where Earth will join you." Jane's eyes shone. She touched his finger. "Together we plot a new course." They left the library and returned to the courtyard. Outside, the night sky was clear. Stars glittered above like distant fires. Jane guided Daniel to a stone bench beneath a flowering arch. The air was still. They sat, shoulders almost touching. "Tell me more of Earth," Jane said. Daniel spoke of Earth's oceans and deserts, of mountains and forests. He described children learning in schools, artists painting simple scenes, scientists studying cells under microscopes. Jane listened, her head tilted. She asked questions about Earth's animals, its seasons, its music. Daniel described piano songs and violin melodies, laughter at festivals, the smell of fresh bread. Jane closed her eyes as he spoke. When he finished, she opened her eyes and looked at him. "I wish to hear this music," Daniel smiled. He reached into his pocket and removed a small device. "This is a music player," he said. "It carries songs from Earth." He tapped a button, and soft notes began to play. A simple melody of piano and strings filled the courtyard. At first Jane did not move. Then she lifted her hand and let her fingers follow the music. She swayed once, then twice. Daniel watched her with quiet joy. Samuel and Eric stood respectfully. Heads bowed, letting the moment belong to Jane and Daniel. When the song ended, Jane opened her eyes. She looked at Daniel with wonder. "Your music speaks to the heart," she said. Daniel bowed his head. "It shows what words cannot." Jane studied him in the lantern light. She seemed to decide something important. She reached and placed her hand on his chest. "Daniel Ross," she said softly, "you have brought hope and understanding." "I trust you." Daniel felt his breath catch. He met her gaze. He could see sincerity in her pale eyes. He reached and took her hand. "I trust you too," he said. In the quiet courtyard, under alien stars, two hearts pledged loyalty. Samuel and Eric stepped forward and bowed. Jane released Daniel's hand and rose. She turned to the path toward the palace doors. "Come," she said. "It grows late." Daniel stood and followed her. They walked back along the vine-lined path, the night air cool on their faces. Inside the palace, servants waited with tea and small cakes. Daniel and Jane sat at a low table and drank quietly. They spoke in soft tones about the day. Jane told Daniel of her childhood, of her lessons in leadership, of her dreams for peace. Daniel shared memories of home, of his sister's laughter, of evenings spent watching the sun set on Earth's horizon. They found comfort in each other's company. The guard stood at attention but allowed the two space. Later, Jane led Daniel to his quarters. The room was furnished simply, yet comfortably. A window looked out at the moonlit courtyard. Jane paused at the doorway. She looked at Daniel with a gentle smile. "Thank you for today," she said. "You have shown me courage and kindness." Daniel bowed slightly. "And you have shown me trust." Jane stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. She looked into his eyes. "Tomorrow I wish to take you beyond the palace. I want to show you my people's villages, the markets, the fields." Daniel nodded eagerly. "I would be honored." Jane reached and brushed his cheek. Her hand lingered a moment. "Good night, Daniel," she whispered. "Good night, Your Highness," he replied. Jane turned and walked away, leaving Daniel alone in the softly lit room. He closed the door gently. He stood by the window and watched the courtyard below. Lanterns drifted in the breeze. The palace towers rose like ivory spires against the dark sky. Daniel sighed with contentment. He placed his hand on his heart. He felt its steady beat. He realized that his mission had become more than diplomacy. It had become a journey of the heart. As he lay on the bed, he thought of Jane's pale eyes, of her laughter, of the trust she had placed in him. He closed his eyes and let sleep take him. Outside, the night wind whispered through leaves as if to carry the promise of tomorrow. Dawn arrived softly on the palace towers. Light filtered through pale curtains in Daniel Ross's quarters. He rose, dressed in his uniform, and stepped onto the balcony. The twin suns were low, casting golden beams across sky gardens. Daniel took a deep breath. Today he would see the lands beyond the palace. He thought of Princess Jane's promise. He gathered himself and walked to the outer door. Samuel and Eric awaited him in the corridor. They bowed as he approached. Daniel nodded, and the guards led him through winding halls. They reached the main gates. Jane stood there, dressed in riding leathers of soft gray. She wore boots made of fine leather embossed with silver symbols. Her hair was braided back, ready for travel. She smiled at Daniel. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning, Your Highness," Daniel replied. Bowing, Jane held out her hand. Daniel took it. They passed through the gates, where two more guards on horseback watched. The palace grounds spread out into fields and orchards. Riders waited by sleek mounts of white and silver. Jane led Daniel to one. She patted its neck and mounted gracefully. Daniel approached a second horse. The guard helped him into the saddle. The mount dipped its head. Daniel felt its warmth and strength. Samuel and Eric climbed onto their horses and flanked the pair. A small escort of riders followed. They rode along a wide path. The air was fresh with the scent of grass and flowers. Daniel saw farms where aliens in simple clothes tended glowing crops. Bright fruits hung from vines. Workers waved as the royal party passed. Jane pointed to a field where a golden grain swayed like a sea in the morning breeze. "This grain feeds my people. It grows in 2 seasons under both suns," Daniel nodded. "It looks healthy and abundant." Jane smiled proudly. Years of care and patience. They rode on to a village of low stone buildings with domed roofs. Children played in the streets. Women carried baskets of fruit, their laughter ringing out. Men read scrolls under awnings. When the royal party entered, the villagers bowed their heads. Jane raised a hand and spoke in her tongue. Daniel listened as the villagers responded in unity. Jane turned to him. "They greet you, Daniel Ross of Earth?" Daniel raised a hand in thanks. The villagers bowed lower, then returned to their tasks. A woman approached Jane, offering a basket of bright fruit. Jane took one and tasted it. She offered one to Daniel. He accepted and bit into it. The juice was sweet and tangy. The woman smiled and bowed. Samuel whispered translations to Daniel as needed. Daniel and Jane walked through the village. He asked questions about their crafts, their festivals, their daily lives. Jane answered, proud of her people. They reached a large tent near the edge of the village. It bore the emblem of healing, a silver leaf on blue cloth. Jane led Daniel inside. Rows of simple beds lined the tent. Healers moved between them, tending to patients. An alien child lay on a bed, bandages over an injury. Healer priests chanted. Softly, Jane and Daniel approached. The child looked up. He smiled at Jane and then at Daniel. Jane knelt by the bed. She spoke gently to the child, her voice soft. The child reached out and held her hand. Daniel watched, understanding that Jane cared deeply for her people. He felt respect for her kindness. They left the healing tent and rode toward a forest of tall, pale trees. The riders slowed under the canopy. The air was cooler here. Jane pointed to a clearing where miners labored, using clear tools to extract a glowing crystal from the ground. They chipped carefully, then polished the crystals. Daniel dismounted and approached a miner. The worker gestured to the crystal, then presented a small piece to Daniel. He held it. The crystal glowed softly. Daniel felt its warmth. Jane's voice startled him. "These crystals power our lights and our ships." Daniel nodded, amazed. He understood the importance of energy to her realm. They mounted again and rode to the edge of the forest. A deep canyon lay before them, spanned by a bridge of carved stone. Water flowed far below. Jane led them across. Daniel felt the bridge tremble slightly beneath the horses. He looked down over the edge and saw fish with rainbow scales dart in the water. On the far side, they rode up a rocky path. The ground opened to a high plateau. The view took Daniel's breath away. He saw the palace in the distance and fields and forests beyond. Jane sat her horse and commanded a halt. Daniel joined her. "Earth's world?" Jane asked, gesturing to the horizon. Daniel's heart swelled. He spoke softly. "It is a blue planet under a single sun. Mountains, forests, oceans, the sky turns orange at sunset. I hope one day you will see it." Jane's pale lips curved. "I wish to." Daniel's throat felt tight. He thought of his home. He thought of his sister waiting for news. And he thought of this promise. Jane reached and placed her hand on his arm. The simple gesture held weight and warmth. They rode back toward the palace in silence. Daniel's mind replayed the morning. He thought of the fields, the village, the healing, the mine, the plateau. He knew this day would shape his mission and his heart. They re-entered the palace gates as the suns climbed high. Jane dismounted and led Daniel back to the courtyard. Servants waited with chilled drinks and light meals. Daniel and Jane sat at a carved stone table beneath an arch of flowers. They ate in companionable silence, savoring the food and the memory of the ride. Afterward, Jane walked Daniel to a shaded bench. She sat beside him. They watched workers tending the gardens. Daniel spoke softly. "Thank you for showing me your world." Jane turned to him. "It is my pleasure. I want you to know where I come from." Daniel took her hand. "I understand more now." "And I want you to know Earth." Jane nodded. She rose and drew from a pocket a small sphere of glass. Inside, a painted scene of Earth rotated gently. "This I keep for you," Jane said. "A reminder of your world," Daniel marveled. "Thank you." "I will treasure it." Jane leaned close. "And I keep your memories in my pool." Daniel smiled. He held her hand and pressed the sphere. Samuel and Eric bowed and left the couple to themselves. Daniel looked at Jane. "Will you visit Earth?" he asked. Jane gazed at his eyes. "If you ask me." Daniel took a deep breath. "I ask." Jane smiled widely. "Then I will come." Under lantern light, two souls from different worlds sealed a promise. They sat on the shaded bench, hands linked, dreaming of stars. The day had shown Daniel Jane's realm. It had shown him her heart. Their journey together had only just begun. Evening light filled the grand hall as Daniel Ross and Princess Jane arrived for the final ceremony of his visit. The nobles and emissaries gathered in formal attire. The hall glowed softly under crystal chandeliers. Daniel wore a dark green suit of Earth design, and Jane dressed in a flowing gown of pale violet. Samuel and Eric stood at attention by her side. As they entered, whispers passed through the crowd. Some faces bore smiles, others looked surprised. All eyes turned to Jane. And Daniel. Jane led Daniel to the center of the hall. She held his hand gently. The court fell silent. "My people," she said, her voice clear. "You know Daniel Ross of Earth. You have seen his courage, his respect, and his kindness. Today I ask you to welcome him not as a guest, but as an ally and friend." A murmur of approval went through the crowd. Daniel bowed deeply. He felt warmth in his chest. He looked at Jane, her pale eyes bright with pride. A council elder stepped forward. He wore robes of blue and carried a scroll. His silver beard was long. He spoke in a strong voice. "Princess Jane," he said, "your choice honors us. We welcome Daniel Ross as ambassador of Earth. May our people share peace and prosperity." The court erupted in polite applause. Daniel straightened and bowed to the elder. Jane released his hand and smiled. She turned to face him fully. She took a small case from her pocket and opened it. Inside lay a delicate pendant shaped like a star. "Daniel," she said softly, "this star is from my sky. Wear it to remember our promise." Daniel looked at the pendant. It glowed softly. He felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Your Highness." He said, "I will wear it always." He fastened the pendant around his neck. The chain settled above his heart. Jane then surprised Daniel and the court. She walked close and placed her hands on his cheeks. Her face came near. Daniel felt his heart rush. Then Jane kissed Daniel on the lips. It was gentle, respectful, and sure. The court gasped. Samuel and Eric straightened, taken by surprise. When Jane pulled back, she spoke again. "I did not care for protocol, Daniel." "I care for you." Daniel stood still, speechless for a moment. Then he found his voice. "Jane," he said, "I care. For you too, more than I ever expected." Her pale cheeks blushed faintly. She smiled and took his hand once more. The court broke into applause. Some nobles wept at the display of affection and unity. The elder nodded approvingly. Jane guided Daniel to a long table set with dishes from Earth and her realm. Fruits that glowed, breads of fragrant spice, and dishes with familiar but new flavors filled the table. Earth wines and alien liquors sparkled. In crystal glasses, they sat side by side. Samuel poured wine for them both. Daniel raised his glass to Jane. "To unity," he said. Jane clinked her glass with his. "To friendship and more," she added. They drank. Then they tasted the dishes. Daniel savored the alien fruits and spices. Jane enjoyed Earth's wine and breads. Around them, the court joined in the feast. Laughter and music rose after the meal. Jane stood and held her glass aloft. "A toast," she called. "To Daniel Ross, ambassador of Earth, and to all who seek peace." The court stood and cheered. Daniel felt tears in his eyes. Music began to play. Dancers stepped into the hall. Their movements were graceful and slow. Jane rose and offered her hand to Daniel. He took it and joined her. They danced together, their bodies moving in harmony. He felt her warmth and trust. Samuel and Eric stood guard at the edge of the hall. As the dance ended, Jane whispered, "Will you stay with me?" Daniel smiled. "I will, if you wish it." Jane nodded and kissed him again, soft and certain. The court cheered once more. The music faded as Jane guided Daniel to the balcony overlooking the gardens. They stood in silence, watching the lanterns drift on night air. Jane leaned on Daniel's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her. They watched as the palace grounds glowed below. Jane broke the silence. "I once thought protocol was everything. Now I know that love and trust matter most." Daniel kissed her hair. "Your courage changed my world." She looked up at him. "Then stay by my side, Daniel Ross of Earth?" He kissed her lips and nodded. "Always." The stars above seemed to shine brighter. The palace grounds lay peaceful. In that moment, too, hearts from different worlds became one. Their journey had begun with a bold kiss. It ended in promise and hope. Tomorrow, Daniel would return to Earth to speak with his leaders. But he would carry Jane and her realm in his heart, and one day soon, Earth would welcome Jane as ambassador of her people. Under distant suns and familiar stars, a new alliance was born. One sealed by words, by gifts, and by love. Their story would be told for generations, a tale of a princess who did not care for protocol when she found true connection, and the man who met her without fear. In simple words, their bond was strong. In basic truth, their hearts were free. And so, the grand hall emptied, leaving only the glow of lanterns. Jane and Daniel remained on the balcony, hands entwined. The world below slept, dreaming of peace. They stayed there until dawn, when the twin suns rose again. And with that light, they faced a future bound together by love and by promise.